What's up, guys? This is a differentiation in the PE space for students with special needs. And I kind of wrote these up on the board. Last time I did that might be, anyway, last time I did gifted students, I didn't really write bullets for you, but the basic differentiations that we do in my classroom in our adapted spaces is equipment modifications, game modifications, our pacing, like our outlook on how quickly we're going to get that standard achieved, and then self-assessing with the students, have the students thinking about their learning and where they are. So as far as equipment modifications, bigger, slower equipment. So if we're talking about needing to make the skill easier, then maybe it's a mobility or manipulative or dexterity special need that they have, where they need modifications to reach that achievement. Instead of using a smaller ball to play catch with, we're going to use a larger ball to play catch with so they can more easily catch the ball. And obviously the cues are all the same with this. We don't change necessarily when we do equipment mods and we think that's going to help. You may be changing the way you're teaching, but not necessarily. That's why I think equipment modification is the number one thing that you need to do. And another way to do this in the classroom where they're integrated in the classroom, which is optimal, is you have several different kinds of equipment that they can choose from, similar to how we did with the modifications and the way you present the material to students that are gifted, where they have choice and they're able to choose stations. I don't know if you remember that one, but this is similar. Let them choose the equipment they play catch with. Have them play catch with different equipment, and notice this is a lot harder to play catch with. This one's easier. And encourage them to use the one that they can catch 5 times in a row. And once you feel like you can catch 5 times in a row, move up to the next one. And that's a little further down the lesson, I think. First, you just start with how to catch, and you just catch. And maybe everybody starts with a larger ball first. And then once you notice students are very successful, just like with gifted students, you give them the option to use a smaller ball and say, hey, this is a little more challenging, but you might keep the larger ball out there for some of those others. Not necessarily as a group offer the smaller ball. Just do it to those students that are needing that extra place to go. Game modifications is a big one. Always teach the games with maybe one thing to think about at a time. So for instance, if we're doing some kind of like a game where we're doing a relay, maybe the relay is very simplistic and all they're doing is going down and putting something in a hoop and then coming back and giving a high five to the next partner. Well, the next time maybe they're skipping when they go down there and then putting in the hoop and then coming back and giving a high five to their partner. Maybe the next time they're skipping and then they're doing 5 jumping jacks and then they're putting, so always increasing the thought so it's not getting stale, but always start your games when you teach them with very little to think about. You don't really want to go into a game. Maybe it's a game like a 6-goal soccer. We have our gym. We have 6 goals we put out, and each goal has a team. And so there's 6 different teams, and they're small in nature. There's like maybe 2 or 3 on a team. One stays in the goal to protect, and they go around with very soft balls that we kick, kind of like dodgeball, skater skin dodgeballs. And we let them go around and kick in those goals. Maybe the first thing we teach is just, this is your goal, protect it, go try to score in the other goals. And then after that, maybe we give them other things to motivate them, other aspects of the game. Like, if you score on the goal across from you, it's 2 points, it's double the points, and add things as you go, but keep it very short in nature as you're teaching the game. And then, 3, 4, 5 minutes into the game, stop that music if that's what has your class stopped, and then give them another place to go from there that keeps the game exciting or adds to the excitement, because they're, once they've all learned it, move on kind of thing. But as far as game modifications for students with special needs, you may have to slow that down a little bit. That's kind of what I was getting at. So you may have to give them very little to focus on, and just the skill is all we're working on. And then add as you need to. You may add a little slower in some of those classes. I also like with game modifications, let's say with volleyball, this goes with equipment modifications. We set up 3 volleyball nets, and we have a larger Omnikin ball that they play with on one net that's very slow, it falls slow, it's big, and you just do a few kids at a time, and maybe the goal is just to get the ball over the net. And it's an Omnicon 6 ball, so the diameter is probably 12, 14 inches. It's not like the 33-inch big one, it's like the 12, 14-inch one. And they're trying to get the ball over the net. Maybe you let it bounce once, we call that ultimate volleyball. And then the next net in the middle is the next level up. So it's a little smaller ball, it's still large though, and it still falls slowly, more slowly than a volleyball, but you have to keep it off the ground. So there's no ultimate rule in that one. And then the third net, and you could just use cones instead of nets if you don't have enough nets. You could just put cones up on some parts and they just have to hit over the cone. That could be another way to modify it to make it more simple. In the third net, you use an actual volleyball. And this is probably maybe like 5th grade and up though. Use an actual volleyball, but still let them do ultimate if they're 5th through 7th grade, and then let them try maybe later in the class to volley it without an ultimate rule where they let it bounce. And you do, when you're doing ultimate, it's as many hits as they get on the side, just get it over. That's another modification to volleyball is a huge modification game, because when you're working down to the younger kids, you really have to modify it to keep their interest into it. And that's all this is, right? We're trying to keep them interested in what they're doing so they can develop the skills that you're trying to teach them, which is setting, hitting, some kind of striking skill. So that's an example of how I modify volleyball. Pacing is how quickly we're trying to get them to learn the standard before we move on to the next unit or the next skill that we're learning. And you don't want to just move on if they don't have it. So when 80% of those kids in your class have it, you can move on, but it's not, you got to be flexible with that and stack the more important skills like striking, throwing, kicking, catching, if you're in elementary, in the front part of your year. And with those younger kids, locomotor first thing, because once they get the locomotor skills, other things get easier for them to learn. So stack those towards the front of your year and leave yourself space to maybe pace some of those classes at different rates, and maybe you have to come back and revisit. Maybe you do move on before they know some of that stuff. It's not prerequisite to what they're learning next, but you come back to it later in the year, and that could be pretty powerful. And then self-assess. I talked about this in the last one, but 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is what I do. You could do, hey, why don't you go to the court with some volleyball, the court you feel most comfortable with, where you think, you don't even tell them this. You just let them know, go to the court you want to go to. And you'll notice they'll go to the court, the one I explained earlier with volleyballs I'm talking about, where they had 3 different options. You'll notice the kids as they go to those where their confidence level is. So in that situation, that's kind of a self-assess for me. I can see how they feel about their abilities in volleyball. So plug and play that as you would with any kind of activity you're doing or unit. But with anybody with special needs, basics are equipment modifications, make everything a little bit larger for them to play with and a little slower. Game modifications, let the game go a little slower in the way they're processing the game, and that way they can be successful and they're more into it. If you notice they start to get not as into it, something's too difficult for them and they're getting stressed out, so we need to modify what's going on. And do it whole class. Modify it whole class, and that's part of the differentiation, is you modify it whole class where everybody can still be into the game. And that's why I try to do options with as many units as we can. Give them options of where they can go and have different kind of stations. Pacing and self-assess. That's all I have for you for SPED. So I've got one more for you. It's going to be students with EL, and we'll get back to that one whenever you get it.